الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهدي الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وبعد. Inshallah, to continue with the book of the Imam Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah, Ad-Da' wa Dawa, the sickness and the cure. We are upon the section of Al-Ighrar bid-Dunya, which is being deceived or fooled by the dunya or the worldly life. And so I'll give like a brief introduction inshallah, and then we can go through the text itself. So I thought it appropriate to start with the poem that was put in the beginning of Riyadh al-Salihin by Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah. He said, "Inna lillahi ibadan futana طلقوا الدنيا وخافوا الفتنة نظروا فيها فلما علموا أنها ليست لحي وطنا جعلوها لجة واتخذوا صالح الأعمال فيها سفنا." So he says there are verily some careful or keen servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They divorced the dunya out of fear of falling into fitna or trials and tribulations. نظروا فيها, they looked into it, فلما علموا, and they saw it, أنها ليست لحي وطنا, that it's really not a place of true life for the people. Like all this dunya is an illusion basically. It's not the real life. The wise people realize that. جعلوها لجة واتخذوا, they made it into like an ocean, and they took their good deeds as the boat to go through it. So this is how the believer is in the dunya. Like he sees it for what it's worth, which is an illusion, a temporary abode, and you're just passing through. The word dunya itself comes from the word dana or danu. Dana means like to be lowered, and danu means to come close. So close, you see it like close to you, and you get fooled by it because you think it's the real thing, but it's not. And dana, being lowly, is what the dunya really is. It's something like lower. The more you follow your lower desires, the more attached to the dunya you become. Right? So that's like one of the main reasons that causes the diseases and the sicknesses of the heart, is the attachment to the dunya, the attachment to this brief temporary world that's an illusion, that's fake, that's going to disappear. People, from being attached to it, they develop jealousy, they develop hatred, they develop selfishness and lust and following the lower desires, right? Because they think it's a permanent abode and they want as much of it as they can get, but they don't realize it's temporary and it's an illusion and it's disappearing. So all the major sins or the diseases of the heart come from attachment to the dunya. Allah Azza wa Jal, He describes in many ayat in the Quran how the dunya is like a brief sojourn or a lahu or a distraction or a delusion. He says, كل نفس ذائقة الموت وإنما توفون أجوركم يوم القيامة فمن زهزه عن النار وأدخل الجنة فقد فاز وما الحياة الدنيا إلا متاع الغرور. That every soul shall have a taste of death, and you will indeed be paid in full or rewarded in full on the day of resurrection. Whoever escapes the hellfire and enters into paradise has indeed truly succeeded. And the life of this world is nothing but a delusion. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says, اعلموا أنما الحياة الدنيا لعب ولهو وزينة وتفاخر بينكم وتكاثر في الأموال والأولاد كمثل غيث أعجب الكفار نباته ثم يهيج فتراه مصفرا ثم يكون حطاما وفي الآخرة عذاب شديد ومغفرة من الله ورضوان وما الحياة الدنيا إلا متاع الغرور. So know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that the life of this world is just play and diversion and glitter and like mutual vainglory amongst yourselves and covetousness of wealth and children. It's like the rain whose vegetation impresses the farmer, but then it withers away and turns yellow and becomes dry. The hereafter then is severe in punishment and forgiveness from Allah and His pleasure, and the life of this world is nothing but a delusion. Again, He's calling the life of this world a delusion. And He's comparing it to this, like plants. Imagine how you see a beautiful plant, looks so nice and pretty and colorful, and then it just turns yellow and dry and withers away. That's how the dunya is. The Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said in authentic hadith, الدنيا ملعونة ما فيها إلا ذكر الله أو عالم أو متعلم. that the dunya is cursed and everything in it is cursed except the remembrance of Allah and the scholar and those who are seeking knowledge. So the scholars in the tafsir, they say mal'un, cursed, basically also means like being preventing you from getting the full blessings, right? In that sense, everything in the heavens and the earth praises Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that falls under dhikrullah, except the human beings and their souls and their aql and the jinn. They have the choice in the affairs. They can praise Allah or not praise Allah, right? So if you're not falling under this category of dhikrullahi or alimun or muta'allimun, the ones who is teaching beneficial knowledge or studying beneficial knowledge, then you can fall under this being prevented from the benefits and blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In another narration, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Dunya sijnul mu'min wa jannatul kafir," that the dunya, the worldly life, is a prison for the believer and like a paradise for the disbeliever, right? The dunya, a mu'min, he doesn't feel comfortable in here. Like, he knows this is not his permanent abode, right? So he feels it's like really like holding him back from his beloved, from Allah Azza wa Jal, from Jannah, from permanent pleasure and love and peace of heart and happiness, right? Because there's always problems and tribulations and trials and down times in this dunya. So a mu'min feels like it's a prison almost. But the non-Muslim, he thinks or a non-believer thinks that it's like a paradise. Like, I'm going to get as much as I can from here because I'm going to live here. I'm going to live forever. He thinks that it's only the material well-being in front of him. Everything else is irrelevant, right? But the mu'min, he believes and he knows that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks the truth, and this is temporary. No matter how beautiful it looks, it's going to disappear. Right? One of the great scholars, Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he was one of the head judges of Egypt at the time, and he came in on his horse, riding into the city, and he had nice thobe and nice dress and a beautiful horse, and he said he looked very well off, mashallah. So one of the non-believers went up he was a blacksmith. He went up to him with soot and dirtiness, and he's a poor person, and he went up and he said, "I thought your prophet said that the dunya is a prison for a believer and a paradise for a non-believer, and you're living in this life, basically you're the head judge and you have all this wealth and glory, and look at me, I'm miserable and I'm suffering and I'm poor and stuff like that." And he said, "All the stuff you see me in is like a prison compared to the paradise and akhirah. And all the stuff that you're suffering right now is nothing compared to the hellfire. It's like a Jannah compared to the hellfire." So it's a reality and perspective. Basically, when you have true iman and true faith, you see the dunya for what it's worth. The Prophet ﷺ said to some of the Sahaba, as they were walking by, they saw a dead carcass of a goat that looked disgusting, and he said, who would purchase this from me? And the Sahaba said, even if it was alive, we wouldn't purchase it. It's like skinny and deformed and it's not worth anything. And he said, the dunya is worth less in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than this dead carcass. Right? So it's perspective. Also, the Prophet ﷺ, he told us how to be in this dunya. He said, "Kun fi dunya ka'annaka gharib aw abiru sabil." Be in this world as if you are a stranger or a wayfarer, a traveler, right? And a stranger, how does he feel? If you're a stranger amongst people, how do you feel? Like, you don't feel comfortable, right? You feel like I got to get back home. I feel out of place. I'm not like at peace at this place. I need to get out of here. And that's how the believer is with the akhirah and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Jannah. Like, he thinks this dunya is not our permanent place. Like, I want to get back to Jannah. I want to get back to Allah. I need to just take what I can and get out of here. Also, like the traveler, when you're traveling, you don't take everything with you. You don't take your whole house. You don't take your car. You don't take everything, all the clothes you have. You take what you need for the journey and you keep moving, right? You're trying to get to your final destination. And that's how the believer is as well. He's trying to get to Jannah. He's trying to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he takes what he needs from this dunya and he keeps going, looking forward to his final destination. If we really realize the worth of the dunya in its totality from the beginning to the end, as long as you live, it's going to feel like yawman or ba'da yawm, a day or part of a day. So just, have some patience and travel through this day or part of the day. Be patient and seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure. And it's reported upon several of the scholars, they said, ما من عبد إلا وله عينان في وجهه يبصر بهما أمر الدنيا وعينان في قلبه يبصر بهما أمر الآخرة. He said that every person has two eyes that he can see with the dunya, the worldly life, right? And he has two eyes in his heart in which he can see the affairs of the next life or the spiritual world, right? And they say, be of those who can see with their heart as opposed to those that can see with the physical eyes, because the physical eyes can be deceiving, but the spiritual eyes sees everything for what it's really worth. So inshallah, it's a brief introduction, and then we'll go through the book as much as we can on this topic, on this subject, in this section. So the Imam, he starts, وَعَدَمُ الْخَلْقِ غُرُورًا مِنْ اغْتِرَارٍ بِالدُّنْيَا وَعَاجِلِهَا فآثرها على الآخرة ورضي بها من الآخرة حتى يقول بعد هؤلاء الدنيا نقد والآخرة نسيئة والنقد أحسن من النسيئة. So he said one of the greatest deceptions for the creation, for the humans, is the dunya, right? And he said that many people will say that like the dunya is cash in hand and the akhirah is like an IOU type thing. So why should I give up the cash in hand for the IOU? And some will say that اللذة الدنيا متيقنة واللذة الآخرة مشكوك فيها ولا أدعو اليقين بالشك. Some say that the pleasure of this world is something that you're certain of, but the pleasure of the akhirah, the next life, is something that you're doubtful for. So why should I give up something certain for something that is doubtful? Then the Imam says, وهذا من أعظم التلبيس الشيطان وتسويله والبهائم العاجم أعقل من هؤلاء فإن البهيمة إذا خافت مضرا شيئا لا تقدم عليه ولو ضربت وهؤلاء يقدم أحدهم على عطبه وهو بين المصدق ومكذب. So he's saying that this understanding or these statements is from the most ignorant of statements, even more ignorant than the animals, because animals, they will stay away from something that harms them. Even if you beat them, they won't go to something that's going to harm. They know something's going to harm them. Animals, right? Bahaim. So he's saying the humans that say this statement are even more ignorant than them, because basically they're saying that this temporary life is better than the eternal life, and they're willing to risk going to hell forever for a brief pleasure, right? So he's saying they got their priorities screwed up. Basically, he reports on Imam Ahmad rahimahullah hadith المستورد ابن شداد قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ما الدنيا في الآخرة إلا كما يدخل أحدكم إصبعه في اليم فلينظر بما يرجع. He said the dunya is nothing compared to the akhirah, or basically it's compared to like if you put your fingers into the river and you take your finger out, how much is left of that water on your finger compared to that river or to that ocean, right? Nothing. So that's how this life of the dunya, from the beginning until the end, the whole worldly life compared to the akhirah is just like that tiny drop of water in the ocean. Time that's even more significant than that. And he's saying, like, he continues that it's not from the aql or the logic to give up a permanent promise from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of Jannah for a temporary deception of the shaitan, right? And he said this comes from either having a lack of yaqeen or lack of belief. So if you don't believe the Quran, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you the truth, or you don't believe what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is telling you, this is going to result in being fooled by the dunya. You're going to think that the dunya, this here and now, is what counts, and the akhirah is just an illusion, basically. But the true mu'min, he sees this world, this dunya, as an illusion, and the akhirah is the real thing, because he believes in Allah and he believes the Prophet. And the Imam, he goes on to say that for those who have shak, they should go back and read the Quran, read the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala where he shows us and he tells us his words are the truth, right? Then go back and to look at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his life. He was called Sadiq al-Masduq, right? The truthful one. When he came with a message, the people, ridiculed him and tried to torture him and tried to, take away all the good from him as much as they could to hurt him, because he was delivering the message. So why would a person of not being truthful go through all that suffering? Right? It doesn't make sense. He was called the most truthful person, or Sadiqul Amin, before receiving revelation, and he didn't lie in the dunya, so of course he's not going to lie in the akhirah. So the Imam is saying, like, use your logic and go and ponder upon the ayat of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the messenger of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you really believe in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam delivering this message of Allah, then you will say that the akhirah is the truth and this life is an illusion, and you won't fall for the trap. But if you have shak in your iman and weakness in your faith, then yes, you're going to get fooled by the dunya and you're going to think it's just the here and the now. Right? So that's the Imam is warning us to be careful to fall into this trap. And if you have that shak, may Allah protect us from it. It could negate your faith. So we must go back to the book of Allah and the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and realize, the truthfulness of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises in the next life and what the Prophet ﷺ promises in the next life. And then he says, كيف يجتمع اليقين بالمعاد وتخلف عن العمل. How can having yaqeen or certainty in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's promise result in people not doing the action? Right? So he says, هذا لأمر الله سؤال صحيح وراد على أكثر الخلق في اجتماع هذين الأمرين من أعجب الأشياء. He said that this is a good question, and it happens to many of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's a wonder why this happens. Because if you truly know and you believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is promising, Jannah or Nar, why would you disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And he gives an example. He says that if you were, I'll read it in Arabic, وهل في طباع البشرية أن يعلم العبد أنه مطلوب غدا إلى بين يديه بعد الملوك ليعاقبه أشد عقوبة ويكرمه أتم كرامة ويبيت ساهيا غافلا ولا يتذكر موقفه بين يدي الملك ولا يستعد له ولا يأخذ له أهيبته. He's saying, like, okay, so there's a king or a ruler or somebody in charge, right? And you're wanted by that person the next day for either a severe punishment or a great gift. Right? Would it make sense the night before? Are you going to, it makes sense to not think about it all, or not to prepare for that meeting? No. If this is the amr of dunya, you're going to be worried about it. You're going to be thinking, like some people when they go before court or the judge or something like that, they're thinking about, what am I going to do? How am I going to prepare? What's the judge going to say? Or if he's saying here, like in front of a king or a ruler, what's the ruler going to say? They're thinking about it, they're preparing for it. So he's saying, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you is more truthful than this. So how can you sleep the night or spend the days in lahu and la'ib and playing around and not think that you're going to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that questioning on the day of judgment? Ya hasratun ala ma faradtu fi janbillah. People will say that, what a regret, everything that I lacked in obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in His right that I owe Him. Every single second that passed that you didn't obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we were going to regret it. Wallahi, when the death comes to take our souls, that moment we're about to die, we're going to regret all the time we wasted. No matter how good you are, because we could have always been better. So imagine those who don't take advantage of all of the time and forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and forget the akhirah. He said this also occurs from da'ful ilmi wa nuqsan yaqeen, that the lack of knowledge and the lack of certainty makes the person be neglectful of remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the akhirah. And he quotes the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, لَيْسَ الْمُخْبِرْ كَالْمُعَيِّن. Like the one who is told something, it's not the same as if you see something, right? And we know the hadith that ihsan is تَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ كَأَنَّكَ تَرَاهُ, to worship Allah as if you see Him, right? Or if not, then it says He's watching you. That's how you develop ihsan. So the mu'min, the believer, he has such a high level of iman that it's like he sees the akhirah, he sees the jannah, he sees the nar. When he reads the ayat, it really affects him. He cries for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can imagine that mawqif, like when you're going to stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's going to ask you about all the stuff that you've done wrong. How are you going to answer Him? All the time that you spent, how did you spend your youth, how did you spend your wealth, how, what did you do in my cause? All these questions you're going to be asked about on the day of judgment. When you start thinking about that deeply and you're going to face Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as a true believer, he's going to be affected by that. And that comes from increasing of knowledge and increasing of certainty. وجميع هذه الأسباب يرجع إلى ضعف البصيرة والصبر. ولهذا مدح الله سبحانه أهل الصبر واليقين وجعلهم أئمة الدين فقال وجعلنا منهم أئمة يهدون بأمرنا لما صبروا وكانوا بآياتنا يوقنون. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's saying that in this some of the problems that result, or some of the weakness of faith and the weakness in certainty, as a result of also not having basira and sabr. Basira is like having the wisdom and the foresight and the knowledge to see the reality of the dunya and to know the sharia and to know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves and what the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam loves, right? And sabr, obviously patience. So he's saying the lack of these things also lead to being neglectful of the akhirah and falling into being fooled by the dunya. And he quotes the ayat that we made them into leaders, يهدون بأمرنا, they're guided by our affair, لما صبروا, when they had patience, وكانوا بآياتنا يوقنون, and they had yaqeen in our ayat, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He made them a'imma, He made them imams because they had yaqeen in His ayat and they had patience. So Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah used to say بِصَبْرِ وَالْيَقِينِ تُنَالُ الْأَمَامَةَ فِي الدِّينِ. With sabr and yaqeen, patience and certainty, you reach the high levels in this deen. A'imma. Then the Imam, he goes into having proper hope. In the previous lectures we talked about having false hope, like people depending on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without doing the proper actions, and we said that's not correct. He says that وَمَّا يَبَغِي أَنَّ مِنْ رَجَاءٍ شَيْءٍ يَلْتَزِمُ رَجَاءَهُ ثَلَاثَةَ أُمُورٍ. Like if you want something, you hope for something, it requires three things. The first one, مَحَبَّةُ مَا يَلْجُوهُ, to have love of that which you're hoping for. Number two, خوف من فواته, and you fear losing that thing. And number three, سعيه في تحصيله بحسب الإمكان, and he strives as much as he can to reach that hope, right? So put it in the context of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You love Allah, you love to reach paradise, you love to reach Him subhanahu wa ta'ala and see Him, right? You fear losing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this life and the next life. You fear going to the hellfire, right? And number three, you strive your hardest to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and following the sharia of Islam, right? Following the book of Allah and the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then he said, the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, من خاف أدلج ومن أدلج بلغ المنزل ألا إن سيدة الله غالية ألا إن سيدة الله الجنة. He said that whoever fears, like adlaj in the Arabic language means that you travel quickly in the nighttime. So in the past generations, the people, they would fear like being robbed by bandits in the streets, when they're in their travels, because they don't have obviously like police and stuff like that we have nowadays, or lights or anything like that. So they had to travel, basically on their own. And there was always bandits sometimes in certain areas that would come and rob them. So they would leave at the night time, and they would leave very quickly so they can avoid this. So the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man khafa adlaj," whoever fears adlaj. But he means it in the spiritual sense that when you fear the hellfire, you rush to do good deeds. And he says, whoever rushes to do good deeds, or whoever goes fast in his journey, will reach his destination. Like the traveler, when he adlaja ila shay'in, when he's like traveling quickly in the night, he reaches his destination faster, right? Because he's in a hurry to get there. The believer, when he does the good deeds and he hopes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he reaches the destination of Jannah, inshaAllah. And then he says to remind us that verily the actually product of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very expensive. It is Jannah. Jannah is not cheap. Think about it. If I always give the example that if I offered to give you, $1 billion, what would you do to achieve that $1 billion? You can do the calculations how much you could spend every day with $1 billion and all that stuff, right? Most people would do a lot to get that. So imagine Jannah is great. Like the last person to exit the hellfire will have the earth and 10 times the earth in one narration. How many billions is that? Jannah is priceless. Just to escape from the hellfire is sufficient enough. Like, I don't know about well, inshallah, I know you guys all, nobody wants to go to hell, right? So just to escape from the hellfire is a gift enough. But imagine to go to Jannah, and فيه ما لا عين رأت ولا أذن سمعت ولا خطر على قلب بشر, that no eye has ever seen, no ear has ever heard, and it hasn't even occurred to any human being, the beauty that we see in Jannah, that will come in Jannah, right? Imagine how valuable this is. And beyond all of that, to look at your Lord and your Creator, the one who created us, to be able to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's the greatest gift of Jannah. Like some of the companions of Jannah will be asked, they will be given, and will be given, and will be given, and they will ask, do you want one more? And they will say, what more can we hope for? What more can we want? And then they will see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, be in the gift to see Allah. وُجُوهُ يَوْمَئِذٍ نَاظِرَةٌ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهَا نَاظِرَةٌ. They will have the shiny, beautiful faces looking upon their Lord. And they will forget all the other na'im. That will be the greatest na'im of Jannah, seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who look upon Him, inshaAllah, in Jannah. Then he quotes the ayat, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ هُمْ مِنْ خَشْيَةِ رَبِّهِمْ مُشْفِقُونَ وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ بِآيَاتِ رَبِّهِمْ يُؤْمِنُونَ وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ بِرَبِّهِمْ لَا يُشْرِكُونَ وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْتُونَ مَا أَتَوْا وَقُلُوبُهُمْ وَجِلَةٌ أَنَّهُمْ إِلَى رَبِّهِمْ رَاجِعُونَ أُولَٰئِكَ يُسَارِعُونَ فِي الْخَيْرَاتِ وَهُمْ لَهَا سَابِقُونَ. That those who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or fearful of Him, and they believe in His verses, and they don't associate partners with Him, and they give from that which they are given, meaning paying like the zakat and the charity, and their hearts are like skipping a beat or pitter-pat, like they're worried in their hearts. Basically, it's like shaking from fear. أَنَّهُمْ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ رَاجِعُونَ, that they will go back to their Lord. أُولَٰئِكَ يُسَارِعُونَ فِي الْخَيْرَاتِ, these are the ones that race to do good deeds. وَهُمْ لَهَا سَابِقُونَ, and they're like striving to get there. So Aisha radiallahu anha, when she heard this ayah, she asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, أَهُمَ الَّذِينَ يَشْرَبُونَ الْخَمَرَ وَيَزْنُونَ وَيَسْرَقُونَ, are these the ones that they drink wine and commit adultery or theft? And he said, no, these are the ones, لا يبنة الصديقة ولكنهم الذين يصومون ويصلون ويتصدقون ويخافون أن لا يتقبل منهم أولئك يسارعون في الخيرات. He said, no, these are the ones that they fast and they pray and they give charity, but they're scared that Allah won't accept from them, right? قلوبهم وجلة, their hearts are like scattered, fearful. So Aisha asked the Prophet ﷺ, like, why are they fearful? Is it because they used to do haram, like drinking or adultery or stealing and stuff like that? And he said, no, these are the ones that used to fast and pray and give charity and do all the good deeds, but they were scared. So imagine the people that are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Then the Imam, rahimahullah, he goes on to mention some of the actions of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, and how they had fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and being fooled from this dunya, and not being fooled by this dunya. So he says, من تأمل أحوال الصحابة رضي الله عنهم وجدهم في غاية العمل مع غاية الخوف ونحن جميعا بين التقصير بل التفريط والأمن. فهذا الصديق رضي الله عنه يقول وددت أني شعر في جنب عبد مؤمن ذكر أحمد. He's saying that the Sahaba رضي الله عنهم, they were known to be like the highest in doing good deeds and actions, and the highest in being fearful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or fearful that their actions won't be accepted. And he said, nahnu, talking about his time, that we're like falling short basically. So imagine our time. And he's saying that the Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu said that I wish I was just like a hair upon a believer, something insignificant that I won't be taken into account. And he said that he used to hold upon his tongue, هذا الذي أوردني المورود وكان يبكي كثيرا ويقول أبكوا فإن لم تبكوا فتباكوا. He said Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu used to hold his tongue and said, this is what's going to cause like my destruction. Like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the two things that enter the people in the hellfire the most is the tongue and the private parts, right? So Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he was holding on his tongue and saying like, this is what's going to get me in trouble. And he used to cry often, and he used to say, oh, you who believe, cry, and if you can't cry, then pretend to cry. Sometimes when you even pretend to cry or like try to get in that emotions, it'll come to you. If you think about the sins that we fell and have regret, thinking about falling short to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the wrongs that we've done, and cry over our sins so we can have forgiveness, inshaAllah. وكان إذا قام للصلاة كأنه عود من خشية الله عز وجل. And when he used to get up for the prayers, it was like he was like a stick, out of fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he goes to talk about Umar radiallahu anhu. He said when he was reciting Surah At-Tur, إِنَّ عَذَابَ رَبِّكَ لَوَاقِعَةٌ, that the punishment of my Lord is coming, or the punishment of your Lord is coming. He said that he started crying so much that he became physically sick, to the point the Sahaba had to come visit him in the house. Right? This is the khashiyah that the Sahaba, this is Abu Bakr and Umar, the two greatest Sahaba, the two greatest after all the prophets of Allah, Abu Bakr and Umar. Look at the fear that they had. And I got a signal that we have to end shortly, inshallah. So I wanted to talk about one more subject. Basically, like in summary, he goes through all the different, like many of the different companions of Allah. Inshallah, you can go back in the book. I'm not sure if the English has it or not, but the Arabic definitely, and see and read like how the Sahaba feared Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how they would cry, for fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how they would like be the most in doing good deeds, and fear that they won't be accepted. Even some of them were quoted like they wish they were like a plant that got eaten and spit out, And these are the Sahaba, because they have yaqeen and they knew like what they could possibly face, right? So as believers, we should be very careful in fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and hoping for His mercy, but doing what we're supposed to do, spending the night in prayers, fasting, following the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, realizing what this dunya really is. The more you realize what the dunya is, the less you'll be susceptible to get fooled by it. Like we mentioned in the beginning, those ahadith. So try to live like that. Like Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah used to say, you can keep it in your hand but not in your heart. Do what you need to do to get through it, but don't be fooled by it. Right? That beautiful deception, like we get fooled by so much. It's a deception, it's a delusion. It's going to disappear. But the akhirah hiya khayrun wa abqa. It's better and everlasting.